Welcome to my podcast, Shaping Your Journey. My guest in this episode is Donna Karlin, renowned life coach, author, and very sought-after lecturer. Here is Donna Karlin. Donna, thank you so much for being on my podcast. It's been a long time that I've been thinking about people who make a difference and what their journey was. So this being called Shaping Your Journey, I realized that you're one of those people that has a very interesting journey, and we'll learn more about it. You know, where you started, where you went, what decisions were made. But where did this all start for you? This whole thing, because some people it's just they started in music and stayed in music for the rest of their natural lives. Others made some left turns, some right turns, U-turns, and some just went on to complete other, not just chapters, but books. So where did this start for you? And then what took you from there? Let's start with that.
So it started with me being a percussionist, a female percussionist. As you know, there weren't many of us in those days. And I met you well over 50 years ago when we were studying. It's mind-boggling, I know. And I loved it. I mean, I studied piano from the time I was 4, and the keyboard instruments was a natural progression for me in the field. And I started playing with the orchestra here in Ottawa in the 70s, and I absolutely adored every minute of it. It was like a lifelong calling. And then my son Michael was born, and I had to take a leave of absence because he needed some surgery and some medical care. And we had no idea what that was going to look like, because at the time he was born, which was 1980, there was one surgeon in the world doing research in his kind of nerve damage. And she was willing to take a chance and experiment on him, really, because he was the first patient in the world operated on that. And from that minute on, I knew I couldn't go back to music, because, you know, it's not a 9-to-5 job. It's not something that you could, make sure that you take care of a child with special needs. So I had to resign from the orchestra, which was an incredibly difficult thing for me to do. And then I figured, okay, I'm going to devote my time to taking care of Michael and going on that, journey with him to help him be as self-sufficient as he possibly could. His first surgery was when he was 5 months old. And that's really important, because the first patient in the world, it was 15 hours long at the Montreal Children's Hospital. And it was just to try to save his arm and his shoulder from amputation, because that's what they used to do in those days. And after he was operated on, the surgeon said to me, "This is going to be staged. As I learn, he will be operated on to try to give him as much function as possible." So by the time he was 2, which was 1982, she had moved to Norfolk, Virginia. So we had to go with her because she was the only surgeon in the world. She looked at me and she said, "You will be working with all my future patients." And I said to her, "No, I won't." And she said, "Yeah." I said, "I have enough on my plate. Thank you very much." And she said, "You do not piss off the lady who will have a scalpel over your son in an hour." That's what she said to me. I said, "We'll talk after his surgery," because it meant I had to go back to school. How am I going to work with future patients with a music degree? I mean, this is a little bit ridiculous. I had a minor, as you know, in those days, you had to take an arts or science up to the 300 level. My minor was in psychology. So I figured, you know what, maybe I will go back to school and see what I could study to be able to be as good a practitioner as possible. So I did. I went back to school. She gave me access to all the top surgeons in the world, because she was it. Like, she was the top surgeon. So, because I wanted to make sure that I knew what people were capable of doing. There's only so far you could push a human being if they physically cannot do certain things. So I needed to know the physicality of it and the emotional quotient of it. So I did. I went back to school in dribs and drabs because I was still taking care of Michael. And that was a pivotal moment for me, because it's a totally different field. And we stayed at Ronald McDonald houses, and one of the managers said to me, "I want you to work with us." And because what you're doing with your son is extraordinary. What you're doing is helping him be self-sufficient and not to be enabling him to need you. And that's exactly what the surgeon said as well. So I actually crafted my own method of coaching psychology back then in shadow work, which was helping people deal with their deepest, darkest fear sides of their psyche and how that applied within the medical realm. So back then, I started working with the Microsurgical Research Center in Norfolk, where she had patients from all over the world. And Michael, of course, he was my guinea pig. Why not use your kid as the guinea pig as you were trying something that would be beneficial to him? And that was the start of my career way back then in 1982 in coaching psychology. So huge shift from music.
Yes, yes. No, interesting. And I want to just interject a little bit. When you and I first met is when I first moved to McGill and we studied with Pierre Belluse, who was God at the time, as we all know it. And anybody would ever ask, who's Pierre Belluse? And what can you say a few words about Pierre Belluse? And I always said, yes. If you wanted just a few words, he made us. He's the guy who set the pace, and he was amazing, but not just in percussion, but in approach to anything. So I'm not surprised that that same fire went into something else, because any of us, I mean, a lot of people were very successful from that group. I remember very well.
Oh, yeah.
But some of them, wherever they went, they had huge success. I mean, how we define success is at least they did something that was incredible for them. And the tools that you got from a teacher, and music being one of them. That's an important element, I think. And the training our minds get with studying with a Pierre Belluse in a percussion world where you had to figure it out constantly, every minute. And I think that sets the stage in general. So I'm really not surprised about your own path and what your trajectory, where that took you because of circumstance, of course, but having the mindset already prepared for that, that's amazing. Um, I mean, these are details that, I mean, things come up all the time, and we're always learning new ideas or new facts about what goes on in the world. And now, because of technology, we have access to all of this information. We can talk about it because there's been a lot of research. So what went on from there? I mean, after all of this, and you went back to school, and now you're a life coach.
No, I'm not a life coach. I don't do any life coaching. I work in the corporate environment organizationally as an organizational psychologist and an executive coach. It's very different.
Okay.
So I want to by that. I'm going to take a detour then, because
Okay.
you brought up Pierre. So what you don't know is when I walked in the first day, he looked at me and he pretty much said, "A female." I said, "Yes." And he goes, "Why should I give you any time? You're just going to get married and have kids, and you're not going to be performing anyway." And I looked at him, I said, "I'm going to be so good that you're not going to be able to not put me on stage." And I told him, "My keyboards are going to be better than yours, because I have, you know, at that point, 16 years of piano." And so I used to challenge him to sight reading, and we would do duets in sight reading. And he looked at me and he said, "Okay, you're right." And then ultimately, I did get married and have a son who needed some special care and had to leave. So it was for so many years, I said to myself, here we go. I wonder if Pierre's wondering, he was right in the first place. And then you put us in touch again. It was you that connected the two of us, because I had no way of figuring out where he was and what he was doing. And so we talked for hours, and he was following my career. I didn't know that. And he said to me, "I am so proud of you. What you're doing is so critically important." And I was shocked, because I said, here I was thinking, okay, she got married, had a kid, and that was the end of her playing. And I told him, when I was working with long-term care patients, now we're going back to Dr. Terzis and her world, I was using stretch songs and hug songs for the patients I was working with. Stretch songs to get them moving, hug songs when we were having a horrible day, because not only was I working with long-term care patients at the time, I was working with parents of terminally ill cancer kids.
Right.
And they knew that their kids were terminal. So, they didn't have much longer to live, and they could be 1, 2 years old, like small little toddlers, the most adorable kids. And I was struggling, working with these families, because I'd fall in love with these kids. They'd be gone weeks later. And the songs really helped both the families and the patients, because the hug song would be theirs and they would sing it to themselves and hum it to themselves. So it was a way for me to use music in that world back then, which is very different from the work that I'm currently doing, because that has morphed over the years. But I don't miss a day. Everything that I learned from working with that within that realm in healthcare, I still do to this day. I actually crafted with a colleague a peer coaching program for the Royal College of Physicians and Surgeons, so doctors and surgeons could coach each other in the realm of healthcare. So there's still a healthcare component to the work that I do, and I'm very attached to that, because I think it's critically important for our healthcare providers and our first responders and people who impact our lives to have the tools to coach each other, as well as work with externals like us.
No, of course.
So
And it's
yeah,
important that people know what's out there, because not everyone has access to the information. Even the doctors, I mean, they're so busy in their own, what they're trying to do, that it's important for them to know what else is there that could be helpful. Um, it reminds me a little bit of, there's a program, a Netflix program that I always enjoyed, The House. That it's the same, to me, it's that kind of trajectory. Here's a person who's an incredible mind, but as a team that's putting this together and saving lives as they go along. Impossible situations to the average person who
yeah,
doesn't people who doesn't have that kind of mind. And that kind of mind was also, he was a musician also, at the character.
yes,
And so it's really interesting to see the connection between music and health, music and medicine, in the larger picture. And at the end of the day, for me, it's all one anyway. But to see that connection and how the mindset always looks for answers and is never satisfied until it works. It's like, it's like music. It has to be a team effort. It has to work. You're always problem solving. You're always solving, because you have to play in time, in tune, the right nuances, the right. And it's a constant. I mean, it's never, well, we got it. That's it. We can just close the book. Right?
yeah.
For me, that's the fascinating part. You're always problem solving from the moment your eyes open. So I bring in House because I enjoyed that
Yeah.
creation of that character and that whole scenario, and all the problems that they have, and all the challenges that come. And I'm sure you saw much of that from where you're standing, right? What were some of the things that you had to deal with? I mean, you had to go through this whole training program besides your own personal mission to be helpful.
Oh yeah. I mean, in the days when I started in this field, there were no courses in what I did. So I had to take bits and pieces of courses and connect them so that it would serve the purpose of the work that I did. And when I went for a master's degree in organizational psychology, it was really funny, because um, it was like a pilot program between OISE, the school in Toronto, and the Professional School of Psychology in California. And when I walked in the first day, because there was two parts. The first part was obviously the classroom work and the interactive work, and then there was the practicum, where you go into the field and you have to get your field practice. So I went a totally different route, which is usual for me, because I never did anything normally. So I walk in, and the president of the Professional School of Psychology from California, I'd never met him before. I'd heard about him because he had written a gazillion books and papers, and he looked at me, and the first thing out of his mouth, I get this a lot, like these strange, like Pierre, saying, oh, you're a female, like, no fooling. I'm not going to swear, I promise. And here, Bill looks at me and he goes, "What are you doing here?" And I'm going for my master's in organizational psychology. And I go, "What kind of question is that?" He goes, "Well, it's a 3-part." I said, "Yes, I know," because I knew what the curriculum was going to be. He said, "When we get to the observational part, I'm turning the class over to you." I said, "Excuse me, I'm paying for the opportunity to go for my master's degree and I have to actually teach it." He goes, "It's your methodology that we're teaching in the organizational part. I
Wow.
know everything about your work and you might as well just take the reins and teach it." And then he told the group, and if you've never had laser coaching, at break, line up and have Donna laser coach you because it's an experience you'll never forget. I said, "Great, now I don't have breaks either." And he just started laughing. So I did. I taught that segment, and people would line up at break time for me to laser coach them 7 minutes, 10 minutes. I could create a huge shift by just zeroing in to the issue at hand and clearing the clutter kind of thing. And I said to him, "I'm not sure where I want to do my practicum." This is after all the classwork and everything else. And he said, "Well, I'm going to be doing some really interesting work in Whitehorse, Yukon. Maybe you want to do your practicum with me." And I'm going, with the president. "Why are you going to be up in Canada doing this?" He said, "Because it's a very unique program for the next wave of First Nation leaders. There's 17 First Nation governments up in Whitehorse. So the next wave who are master's degree holders,
Wow.
which the elders really had a hard time figuring out, what am I going to do with these kids who are going to be taking over our tribal traditions." I said, "You know what? I would love to do that." So I did my practicum in Whitehorse, Yukon, and I walked in and they looked at me, these amazing people from the various tribes, and they didn't open their mouths. They wouldn't speak. And I said to Bill, "Now what? What am I supposed to do here?" He said, "You have to gain their trust. Obviously, there's an issue." So I just looked at them and I said, "Okay, what is it? You're not talking to me. I'm here for my practicum. You at least need to tell me what's going on so I could try to figure it out with you." And a couple of them laughed. One of them said, "We've never seen a redheaded person before." And I just started laughing with that one. And they said, "And we've never worked with a female leader before." I said, "So you're going to learn a couple of things as well as me learning a couple of things." And they just adopted me. It was the most extraordinary experience. They not only showed me, like a couple of them didn't show up for class a couple of days. And I said, "Is everything okay?" And they go, "You're up in Whitehorse now." I said, "Yes." "Well, it's hunting season. We had to take our kids out and show them how to hunt
Wow.
and take the kill to the people who process it or whatever for us." And one of them said, "We'll make you some moose meat pepperoni." I said, "Thank you. I can never look at a pizza in the same way again. I'm going to see antlers growing out of my pizzas." And they just burst out laughing. What they did, though, they had written books for their kids so that their kids would understand their history and their traditions and the culture of their tribes. And they gifted me with those books, which are not available to the public, and hand, drawn, diagrams or whatever. I was so honored. And that really shaped my understanding of, the First Nation, the tribes and what they're dealing with. And now we see what's happening, with their influence on government. And I did a lot of work, subsequently with government leaders and politicians and leaders in government departments. It really helped them with my understanding of what I learned in doing my practicum. So it really has evolved in so many different ways. Yeah.
It was about time too. I mean, absolutely, absolutely. Yes. I mean, I played in Whitehorse with repercussion. We played every single corner of this country and more, and then some, world tours. But in Canada, especially in the beginning, we played, like, I mean, everywhere. I started putting a log of restaurants where not to eat, where to eat. I had to bring my own espresso machine because back then,
Yeah.
you say espresso, they say, is that the
Yeah.
yeah, so very, very interesting from that perspective, and it's really nice. So where did that go for you from there though?
So after I got my master's, I came back and I decided that I have to expand my methodology. And because I had more depth of learning in the human psyche, and that really helped me. What was interesting was I was at a conference and I was speaking on shadow coaching, which is my method. And somebody from Calgary who knew me quite well, she woke me up at 3 o'clock in the morning. For her, it was like midnight, right? She was also like 20 years younger than me. And so she was full of energy. We shared a room. And she wakes me up at 3 a.m. and I go, "What? I need my sleep. I'm speaking tomorrow." She goes, "You're going to get up and you're going to register the School of Shadow Coaching right now, because if you don't, somebody's going to love what you share and they're going to steal it." So I did. I registered the school at 3 o'clock in the morning. When
What?
I did my talk, I said, as of 3 o'clock this morning, I have a school that I'm supposed to be teaching this method by, and I had people signing up left, right, and center. So the school and teaching my methodology, which was a recognized methodology from the International Coaching Federation for credit, I taught on 6 continents. It took me to many parts of the world where I guest lectured. In some places, like Milan, I was there for 7 years. I'd go back. In Australia, I did a roadshow because they wanted me to teach that methodology, which is so far, out of the realm for them. And they have phenomenal practitioners there. They also have a college of coaching psychology, which is the only place there, and I think England has one now. In the States, it's a no-no. You don't mix psychology and coaching. And I go, why?
Wow. It's interesting.
I rock the boat everywhere I go. So
So
yeah.
is
Yeah.
that on an academic level or corporate or both?
What do you mean?
The whole approach, like, are people in universities interested in this, or is it aimed at the corporation? Um, and what would be rejecting? Why would it not work? I mean, these are things when you analyze and you understand how the human mind works. Wouldn't it be logical that that's what you want to have answers? You want to have not necessarily programs, but methodologies of solving, of moving forward, of creating a better situation, for lack of a better word. No?
You would think so. The credentialing body, which is out of the US, they decided that you don't mix psychology and coaching, because psychology is the past to the present. Coaching is future back to present, or present into the future. So you can separate them. When I do shadow work, though, I'm using Jungian. I don't want to go into the technicalities of it. Yeah, like Carl Jung's archetype of shadow in the decision-making component. So if I'm working with a border guard, for example, group of border guards, and I say to them, what is it, what keeps you up at night? Well, some of them, the pivotal moment for them was 9/11, right? Which is normal for people to, change their fear-based decision-making because, am I letting a terrorist into the country, always weighing on them, or they see somebody that they're not sure of and they let them in the middle of the night, they wake up wondering, was that a wrong decision? And that's where my work starts, right? If you're making fear-based decision-making, you're not, no clarity of thought in order to make the right decisions. So to make them aware of that kind of decision-making and that it's present, they could get past that and actually shine a light on those fears and let them not be so dark. It was fine for me to be credentialed to teach it, but they don't like people using it. And when I was invited to Australia for the first time, they wanted me to speak on this. And at the time, I was working with a lot of people in turbulent environments, like after the tsunami in Indonesia and plane crashes and, working with investigators, that kind of thing. And one of the guys that have been in the business for forever from Australia came up to me and said, "You're clinically insane, and I have the credentials to prove it. I can't believe that you're working in that realm. Nobody works in that realm." I go, "That's why I'm working in that realm, because nobody works in that realm." And, for people to, shine a light on their shadows, it's critically important. So I decided a long time ago, I'm not going to let anybody limit what I could bring to the table, which has made me so successful. And people, knocking on my door for me to work with them, because what I do is so different, and I'm usually present unless it's a war zone. I'm usually there shadowing and doing shadow work with my clients and their teams throughout a day. So I pick up all the nuances of what's happening in the environment, and it's incredibly powerful.
Wow, wow, that's interesting. And you've written a lot of books. I mean, I was looking up. I said, I knew you had written a few books, and then I was scrolling down, and I'm saying, wait a second, where does this end? You've written. Congratulations, by the way. That's
Thank
amazing.
you.
I mean, I'm so happy that you're putting this down on paper and it's archived, and we can have access to it. So, what are some of the topics of the books that I was looking at? Terribly interesting, incredibly interesting. I mean,
Thank you. You know what? I decided that it was time to get stuff down. And I'd written a book for Book Boon, which is the largest ebook seller in the world for the corporate and educational worlds. And I decided, you know what? Maybe I'm going to write some topic centric books, because my clients are dealing with certain situations. And everyone's dealing with those situations. So let me get it down in a book and let people do some self coaching kind of thing. And so I wrote, in the league of your own, to be not the best, but the only. And if you're the only, people notice you, and you move forward in life. A lot of them are corporate and organizationally focused. The book, Inquiring Minds Want to Grow, that's for everybody. And what was really fascinating, that's a much longer book. It's a series of stories that show you anecdotally how we view ourselves in the world as a whole, and the stories that we own that we shouldn't own. And one of the things that I wrote about that some of my clients from 15 years ago still use, like, what is so perfect about this when it clearly isn't? Look at me and they go, "I'm going to kill you. This isn't perfect. There's nothing perfect about this." I go, "Yeah, there really is. Let's look at it." And then they start digging. And what's perfect is I see what I'm made of in this circumstance. The circumstance isn't perfect. It's like going through what I did with Michael. What is so perfect about this when it clearly isn't? I mean, he went through hell. He went through 17 years, close to 18 years of surgeries, over 80% of his body, and daily physiotherapy and machines and everything else. It was not an easy journey for either of us. And so that book really helps you view yourself through a lens that's purely yours because you craft it. And my mother read it. She's just turned 97. She's an amazing lady. And when she read it, I said, "Ma, like, why are you reading the book? Like, what do you hope to gain from it?" She says, "I'm not going to change at 97. What I can tell you is I was reviewing in my mind some of the decisions that I made over the years, and now I understand them."
yeah,
And that to me was mind-boggling.
sure, sure.
So I'm very, very thrilled with that book. That's for everybody. It's not corporate. It's just people. So I wrote 16 books that year.
Wow, wow.
Yeah. And like 15 of the Book Boon books, and this one, which was a long one. So every time it was with the editor, I'd write a smaller book, because I was in a writing mode, and then I'd get it off to the Book Boon editors, and that's how it went. So yeah, I'm thrilled with them.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for asking.
No, but it's interesting. The inquisitive mind. I mean, it all comes down to being inquisitive, wanting to know why. If you're not curious, you cannot get to that next level. It's curiosity that really opens up a lot of those doors. I mean, I know myself. Why do I do certain things? Well, I'm curious. Like, how is that? How does that work? Or, the day I think when you stop thinking like that, I think is a dangerous day, right? And not a good day when you're not curious about something that you've let go. So I think the fact that you're appealing to this curiosity part of your mind, I think that keeps you going. And to understand certain things, of course, we make decisions, and nothing is a coincidence in my book. Um, Everything is you make decisions, and they take you to a certain place, and it's always a good decision. Then you decide, is this where I want to go? Then you can change and make another decision.
Yeah.
You didn't make the first decision, you wouldn't realize about the second decision. So it's an ongoing thing, and you have your whole natural life to work that out. And it's the voyage, it's the trip that's more important, not to get there. If you ever arrive, I tell you, if you think you've arrived, sit down for a minute and figure it out, because it's impossible. You never arrive. You arrive for a specific thing. Like you arrive at your house, well, then you're at your house. But then you arrive at other things or whatever it is. And it's always, all the decisions we make are always the right ones. And as long as you don't stop and you don't lose that, getting back to the curiosity thing. So, yeah, I have to get that book, Donna, and I'm going to.
Let me know what you think. I'd love to hear what you say. Pardon me?
I'm going to drill you on, not drill you, but I'm going to share some thoughts about that one once I read it, because I can see it already. Nice, nice.
You got it. One of the things you're talking about, perfection. A lot of people say to me, it's not perfect enough for me to launch. And I go, it's never going to be perfect. Or you should hope that it's not going to be perfect. And they look at me, or I'm not, good enough, that kind of thing. For me, like I say to them, what is perfect exactly according to you? And they look at me and they go, like, getting to a point where there's nothing after that. I said, exactly. If you get to a stage that you think is perfect, there's nothing afterwards. Is that what you want? You want nothing afterwards? You want to get to an end game and have nothing more to learn, nothing more to grow into? And they look at me horrified. They go, no, I don't want that. I go, so don't look at perfect. Perfect according to you in this stage? Sure, you could do that. But perfect, that's an end state. There's nothing after perfect. And perfect according to whom?
Right. Exactly.
Right? So there you go.
Those I'm noticing all of those frames behind you. Obviously, they're like gold records that we hang, and you know all about that. But obviously, they have some meaning. I can't read them, but maybe you could tell us about what some of them mean.
Well, I have my TED. You could probably see the TED, the red TED, because I'm a TED coach and I work with the TED Fellows. So I help them take their ideas to fruition, from an idea to actual tangible work that's out there in the world. And I want to adopt them all, that's for sure. And some of them are some of the projects that they've done. So one of them is works with victims of domestic violence. She's in India, and you know what things are like for some women in India. So that work is critically important for me. The one here, over here, with all the faces, those are the first responders that passed away from COVID. And I work with first responders. So that's a memorial that was put together to raise money for the families of those first responders that had passed away because of COVID. I have a thank you from the Capitol, because I worked with the US government and the director of the federal consulting groups. That was a thank you for the work that I did. I taught them. And the others are articles about my work from the New York Times. I have a poster of all my book covers, up to date, which reminds me I have to keep writing. I have Camille Seaman over here, which is she does work on the North. and she's published a book that is exquisite. She's a TED Fellow also, but glaciers that are melting and icebergs that are melting. And just some of the projects that my clients are doing that are so critically important. It's a reminder to me that my work is important and not to let go of it. I have some letters that are framed saying, you know, the impact that the work that I did with them and what it meant to them that I want as a reminder. And when it gets to the point where I don't wake up ready to jump out of bed every morning, dying, you know, to have my next meeting because I know it's going to be mind-boggling, that's when I'll hang up my hat and figure out if I'll just write or you know what slowing down is going to look like. For now, it's not happening.
What is your um let me see, not focus, but where do you see this going, or where do you want to see this going in the line of writing and mindset that you've been working on? Like,
There's so much that I still want to do, you know, although as you would know, I'm in my 70s, right? So it's like how I know. Like, you know, people look at me and they go, "You got to be kidding!" I go, "No, I'll cause trouble as long as I could cause trouble, and that'll be fine." And my husband knows if I ever completely retire, I'll drive him crazy. So that's not happening anytime soon. I want to continue writing, not at the pace that I did last year because it really was so all encompassing. You know, that and client work was a lot. Um, I would love to do something with students. I would love to take what I learned in the TED world, how to get up there and present yourself, never mind an idea, yourself, and to see if maybe, you know, in the high school level, they'll let me come in and volunteer. I don't want to get paid for this. So that I could help the next wave. It's going to be hard for them with AI and everything else that's happening. It's there if they don't shine and stand out in some way, shape, or form, and recognize how they could achieve mastery. What the keys are to that, they're going to have a really rough time. So I want to see how I could help in that.
yeah.
And maybe do some volunteer also work with cancer patients because I'm a 2-time cancer survivor. And I learned a lot about myself and how to take care of self while still working. Like I didn't stop working. I did stop traveling, no, while I was going for treatments for sure. Video conferencing, you could do a heck of a lot that way. So most of my clients didn't know I had cancer at the time. It's yeah, so there's a lot that I still want to do and balance that with the love of life and enjoying our grandson and our kids and our golden retriever, you know, just to be out there with Chester and enjoying the nature and the surroundings is important. I need to, you know, stay refreshed. And it gets harder as you get older to you know, manage your energy. And I always say, don't manage your time, manage your energy.
Yeah.
And everyone will have a different level of energy, and make sure it's not a work-life balance, it's psychological balance. Have your psychological balance. Look at the world as what you're there to give. Don't live by anyone else's story of you. Live your own story. And that's what I do every single day. And if somebody doesn't like me, well, that's their business. I will not live my life according to their standards. It's according to mine. And stay in touch with great people that I've gotten to know over the years. I know we don't see each other anywhere near as much as I would like, but you know, when we do see each other or talk, it's such a gift.
Yeah, I know it and for me likewise, Don. It's amazing because it takes me back. Also, going back to the roots where things started, where things kind of took their flames, where those fires got going, and all the energy that we all dealt with. Wow. It's
Yeah. Wow.
I always tell Yolanda, I says, you have no idea what it was like walking into McGill and all those people. I was like scared to death. And by the way, you're an incredible mallet player, and everybody was so jealous. And all of us had to work so hard. And she would show up and just play.
It's all the years of piano I had. That's, it's a good precursor for that, right?
Course, but it was interesting, the dynamics between people, when you're in a situation and what happens with those dynamics. We're a group of people that worked, and of course we had a great leader, of course. But as we said, and he always mentioned he had a lot of respect for you, by the way, Donna, and even in the beginning, the women thing, and it's strange because a lot of people would have that attitude, but they would quickly, for in one form or another, realize that's crazy, and so we move forward, and then being true to yourself and being that same person, being that same person that you were when you were 10 years old, 15 years old, 75 years old, 70, whatever. The consistency to me is when I see people, if I see consistency, now that's a person who got it. Being consistent, who you are, and just keep working. We're all work in progress, and then the more you are able to do, that's our purpose. Then you do it, and you do, and you to everybody's benefit. And if everybody's okay, then you're okay. If everybody's not okay, you can't be okay, right? So that's important, and giving homage to those people who, in one form or another, directly or indirectly, helped you not just become, remain that person who you were, who was created, and then you just try and improve it. And as we get older, you mentioned numbers. For me, it's crazy. People ask my age. I have a hard time with it just because I don't understand the numbers, and I'm pretty good at math, but those numbers I don't understand. And I
Yeah,
still
I getcha.
have the same problem. So, but it's the mindset, what you're able to do. And of course, the things that we would do in one day. I mean, I know, and you're probably the same. You do 3 days in one, and now you just do one day in one, and that works. You're right. And then time and things take a different meaning. Focuses take a different meaning. Now you can do more in 30 seconds than we used to be able to do in a day, right?
For sure. For sure.
Take advantage of that. And then people, you can call upon and say, hey, what do you think of this? Or get an idea, or not get an idea, but share a thought and get a feedback from people who have been there all along. And that's really nice stuff. It's
Oh,
nice
yeah.
spaces with people who are still standing and still thinking and still curious, right?
By the way, the story about Pierre and my first days at McGill, they're in my book, Inquiring Minds.
Uh,
Just so you know, that story's in there because it really did shape my focus, my determination.
Beautiful.
I have a funny story for you that brings music and my world together. I was speaking at an international coaching, it used to be International Coach Foundation in those days, conference in Quebec City. And it was 7 o'clock in the morning. I went downstairs to get some coffee. And I'm sitting there and I hadn't woken up yet. The caffeine hadn't hit me yet. And I hear this voice in my ear, British accent. What are you doing here? And I look up and it's Ben Zander, conductor. He was speaking on the art of possibilities. He's a fabulous speaker and an amazing conductor. He's one of my favorite conductors, and he was a guest conductor. So I played under him a few times. And I said to him, what do you mean, what am I doing here? It's a coaching conference. He said, exactly, because he didn't know I switched careers. I said, oh, I'm not doing music anymore. And I gave him a very quick overview of what I was doing. And it was so good to see him. And I said, you know what? I'm working with your niece. She was at the Canadian International Development Agency and she was one of my clients. And he said, you've got to be kidding. I said, the first day I was working with her, I look and there you are on her wall. She says, a picture, so proud of you. And I said, I know him. And she couldn't understand, how would I know Ben, right? So Fast forward, I'm a founding fellow of the Harvard Medical School Institute of Coaching. It's coaching within healthcare. And I was at one of the conferences, and he was going to be the closing keynote speaker. And people were so excited to see him, do his thing with the quartet and to show where, animation comes into anything. He's just an amazing man. And I couldn't wait to see him. And people were lined up, and his ex-wife, who he talks with, doesn't do marriage well, but those two have a good working relationship. She sort of kept people at bay because he wanted to set up and just, have a clear mind. And I was sitting with a colleague of mine. Unfortunately, he passed away. He was the head of coaching at Google. The only time I would see him are at these conferences because he lived in California. And so he saved the seat for me in the front row because he knew that I couldn't wait to see Ben. So I'm walking up the front to go towards my friend David, and I see Ben there. So I just kept on going. And Rosamund, his wife, ex-wife, said, no, he's not speaking to anybody. And Ben turns, he goes, you, I know. And he came over and gave me this huge bear hug. And my friend David's looking, how the hell do you know, this conductor? And we just embraced each other. It was just so good to see him. And I said, people don't know what it is to perform like magic until they see you. Because he starts with a quartet of students who are proficiently wonderful. Then he does his thing. He's hopping up and down, and he's going louder here, softer here. Come on, bring your personality into it. And then it totally morphs the music. And he shows the difference between just going by the book and bringing your whole personality into something. And he equates this obviously with the work environment. And so David finally said to me, how do you know him? I said, I played under him. It was a gift. He was a guest conductor when I was a musician, and nobody had known that I was a musician in that world. And they go, you got to be kidding. We didn't know. What instrument, right? Percussion. Oh, come on. So that's what I get on a regular basis. So, it brings both worlds together on a regular basis, and it keeps me honest. It keeps me remembering, because I said to Ben, people go to their bosses and they go, I need an extension. I'm not ready, to give them like a project or whatever. I just need an extension. I said, what if a musician came to you and said, I'm not ready. I'm not going on stage tomorrow. Said they wouldn't go on stage ever again. They'd lose their jobs. Okay. I said, it doesn't occur to a musician to say to the conductor, I'm not ready. They bust their butt in order to be ready. You know what it's like. We were practicing until 2, 3 in the morning to be ready to get on stage. And you don't do that in the corporate environment. You think you have the ability or the permission to not meet your deadlines. And it's really something. It keeps you honest, I think.
No, and also responsible, because if you are taking that position or whatever it is, whether you're a performer or a project manager or presenting something, there are 3,000 people or 100,000 people waiting on that day, and you need to be there, ready or not. I mean, you are ready. That composition or that performance is going to be ready, because that's what happens at that moment. That's a really good analogy, though. I like it, because like you say, the concert is 8:30 Saturday night, and be there. Everybody else is going to be there. And if you don't know your concerto by then, you shouldn't be there, and you won't be there. It's so, whatever that music is, or whatever that preparation is, whatever it takes, and everybody has the same responsibility. That's a really good. I'm going to use that one.
Yeah, good.
It's an excellent one, because you're right. We cannot, and we do not show up unless something happens to us physically, and it does happen. But that's another thing that someone asked me, I said, you're always running around the world and you're always performing. Are you ever sick? And then you think, well, of course I'd be sick, but I'd be performing too. And we don't have days off. And I would turn around to the guys in repercussion when we used to do 152 concerts a year. I would fly back as I to do a regular TV show. I'd be doing all the studio work. We'd be out on the road. I said, did we ever cancel a concert? I don't remember ever canceling any concert in my life,
Yeah,
right?
that's
And
right.
I had never thought about that. The only thing I remember is sometimes arriving in a town somewhere and you're really physically not in good shape. So you go to the clinic while everybody's setting up and doing what they have to do, and the doctor looks at you and you say, I have this headache or whatever it is, or this thing that's I can't think straight. I can't. Uh, so the doctor looks at you and says, I have tickets to your concert, so we're going to make sure you're there. How's it go? Um, but we've never canceled a concert. Isn't that interesting? And I ask everybody the same thing. Have you ever canceled a concert? The answer is no, unless
Yep.
you're a singer and you lost your voice. That's a different story. But normally you pace it so that you can handle it. But that's an interesting one.
In 2018, our house was hit by a tornado and we were evacuated. We went to my son and daughter-in-law's, and I realized we needed to look for a long-term place to live. They had a small little condo at the time, and I was supposed to fly out to Chicago. So it hit on Friday. Sunday, I was flying out to Chicago because I was facilitating a group thing called Emergent Leaders that I used to do in corporations with 60 people. Um, that was all hands on, like nothing could be done through video conference. And I said to my husband, Ray, I said to him, you know what? I'm not going to stand and look at a broken house. The insurance adjusters have to come. There's a lot that has to happen. And that happened Saturday. The adjusters came, looked at the damage, and then had to figure out, builders and all that kind of stuff. And I said, and we need to find a long-term place to stay. So I'm going to call some of my contacts to see if anybody knows of a place that we could rent for long-term. And I put it out on social media, actually, and I had 5 suggestions, for one of which was perfect for us. A townhouse that we could rent, and the insurance would pick that up and all of that. And I flew out to Chicago. And I tell everybody, you have to turn your phones off except for me. And they look at me because they knew me. And then I said, I'm waiting for the insurance adjuster to call because our house was hit by a tornado. And you came? I said, what am I going to do? There's nothing that I'm going to do other than stare at a broken house. They have to remove the trees. They have to do a lot. You can't even get into the street. I mean, it was a disaster. And so I said, I could do what I need to do from here, give permission or not. And we found a place to stay. So we're going to be moving in as soon as I get back from Chicago. And, my husband's fine. Everything is good. So why should I cancel? Why should 50 people or 60 people, I think it was, not have the benefit of this? They were flying in from other cities because it was across the US, this company. So you're going to the trouble of coming in. I'm going to be here to do the work that I promised to do. And I did. I stayed in touch. I gave, the okays, or said, no, please wait until I'm back. And everything worked, perfectly. Canceling was not going to do anything for me. The only time I did cancel were, I was supposed to go to Mumbai and Sao Paulo to teach. And I was re-diagnosed at that point with cancer right after the tornado. So I had to cancel those trips.
Yeah.
And that was fine. It's not like people had registered yet. I was just doing the initial planning of it and the venue search and all of that. So that was fine.
Yeah. No, well, the survivor, and you keep moving. You can't, certain things you cannot control, but what you can control, it's in your hands, right? You mentioned something really interesting earlier about uh, being yourself and creating yourself and always showing yourself. And this whole new idea of, well, it's not so new anymore, AI that's come into the picture that's refabricating what you would be technically. So, I mean, I mean, we all use AI to a certain degree, but there's certain aspects of it that scare me to death. And that's taking out the human equation to a lot of things. I mean, a friend of mine was showing me how you can write compositions, and I was fooling around with it. I say, "Oh my God!" But and it can replace certain things to a certain level. But that human element is being washed over for convenience sake. Um, yeah, I'm looking at this closely and keeping an eye on it. Uh, it I don't like it. I mean, it's a great tool, and I think for certain things, it's fabulous. It's an incredible thing, but as anything that comes up that or comes to us as a society, it has all its great value, but it has the equal negative impacts, which are in this one. I think they're huge on all levels, in the basic human level, especially, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And maybe we should write a book about dealing with AI in the aftermath when the robots are moving us around. You know? Well,
There's some aspects of AI that are very valuable.
for sure.
Me, it's a yes and conversation, not an either or. So what I mean by that is when it comes to artificial intelligence, years ago, one of the testers had developed a program for the computer, specifically aimed towards college students, especially those who had no friends or anything at the college. And a lot of them went through depression because they felt very isolated. And this program was actually programmed from somebody who studied all kinds of culture and facial expressions. So if a student was typing and their typing speed changed dramatically, or they would type and then just stop, it was indicators of possible starting of depression. The computer would say, Aldo, is everything okay? How could I help? And it would be something that the student could talk to, and then it steer them towards the closest help group
Hmm.
that's possible, the activities that were happening on their campus. So what it was not a human being, but it was somebody who responded to them and really helped. Now that's a very long time ago, and they're still working on that kind of thing. Somebody said, they're working on coaching, and there's a lot of coaching and psychology through AI and the cause and effect of having a conversation with your computer, your cell phone, whatever it is. And people say, what do you think about that? I said, it will never replace the work that I do. However, if that's all the person has access to and it could possibly help in some way, it's better than nothing.
Yeah.
Um, it's still learning. It still tells you, verify what I share with you. Michael, my son, one of his projects was to write the policy for artificial intelligence for the federal government of Canada and the ethical policy for it,
Yeah.
which was really quite something and not an easy thing to do. So we were talking AI when he first started that project. And I said, well, if you typed in, tell me about Michael Karlin, what would it say? He said, nothing. So what do you mean nothing? I said, okay, 1 minute. We were on the phone. So I pull up AI and I type in, tell me about Michael Karlin. And the answer was, Michael Karlin is a private individual. It is not ethical for us to give you any information on him. I was really shocked and pleasantly. So then I said, tell me about Donna Karlin. It spewed out stuff like you wouldn't believe. Everything was right except for my book titles. So I type back, I go, everything is right except the titles of my book. My books, I didn't write these books. I actually like some of the titles. I did not write these books. This is what I did write. And I wrote in some of what I did, and it apologized. We're very sorry. Thank you for correcting us. So I asked again, what are the books that Donna Karlin published? So I got the title right, the subtitle wrong. So I corrected them again. Most people don't bother doing that. They read it, they use it. And that's not good because it gives you all kinds of faulty information. You're not quite sure where it's drawing from.
Yeah.
So it's in its infancy, and I think it's going to directly impact the not next generation, the generation after, and their ability to get work. They're going to have to be really savvy in how to partner with AI to give more than they would just by themselves. So rather than be replaced by it, partner with it, and they will find the jobs that they're looking for.
Which is the same idea as in the past. You know, the Industrial Revolution, the everything, recordings. I mean, live recordings too. I mean, that whole world. If you make these things your friend and you work along with it, then you're actually on top of it, and you're the guiding light in front of the curve. You know, when a horse is replaced by the carriages with motors, that changed everything, right?
Yeah. Oh boy, did it ever. Yeah.
Bought it, you lost. But if you design those things and then you create a whole new world, a whole paradigm of the moving business, right?
Yeah. That's it.
Yeah, that or you stay behind and yeah, and then not part of it. And then you look for work that doesn't exist.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Anyway, this is all very interesting, and I mean the shadow. Do you want to explain it a little bit so that when your shadow, um, what did you call it?
Shadow coaching, the archetype of shadow. Yeah.
What is that exactly? Just in a nutshell, so that are you standing behind while somebody's doing the work and you are uh, giving feedback?
Okay. I'm usually with a client in the context of their worlds and their jobs. So I will observe, and I will note down specific moments in time where they shine, where they didn't step into their leadership, all of that. And then we find time to have that feedback or a laser coaching session for 5 minutes to help them see something, like one thing in a short period of time. So I'll tell you a small anecdote, okay? Right after I got my Nexus card, I was going through customs to go to the States. And I was coaching a border guard. So he was a young guy. He wanted to go into public policy and get out of being a border guard. So whenever I'd be at the customs area, he would take a break and I would coach him. I would never go into his line because that's a conflict of interest. It's not good for him to screen somebody who's working with him. So we made sure that I never went to his kiosk. Then when the Nexus card happened, you go to a Nexus line. So I go through and the Nexus officer says, this is your lucky day. It's 5:30 in the morning. I have a 6:30 flight. I go, what is so lucky about my day? He said, you won the lottery. I said to him, what lottery at customs? He goes, what we do is we take somebody into the back room to screen them who has a Nexus card to keep the program honest. And nobody came before you, so you're it. So I went into the back room where all the undesirables are they go through the luggage and everything else. And I'm watching because that's what I do. I'm an observational person, right? So I'm watching somebody's luggage just get ripped to shreds because something was in the lining, and it was really something to watch. And I see there's a guy in an office, and my guy that I was coaching sees me and he waves and he goes in. That's his boss's office. So he goes into his boss's office and he speaks to him about something, waves again and leaves. So his boss calls me in. to interview me. And evidently, the young guy that I was coaching said to him, "Oh, is Donna coaching you too?" And he didn't know what he was talking about. So he said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "You just ask her what she does and you'll understand." So he said, "So what is it that you do?" I said, "Could I show you instead of tell you? Because it's really hard to explain it. It's much easier. I promise it won't be painful. And at any point you want to stop, feel free to stop me." So I asked him, "How long have you been a border guard?" And he said, 16 years. I said, "That's wonderful. What's changed for you?" He said, "I've had 2 promotions. Now I'm head of this unit." And he shared with me a few things that had happened. And I spoke about this a bit earlier. What was a pivotal moment for you? He said 9/11. I said, "What changed from 9/11? He said, I always wondered, did I let a terrorist into the country?" I said, "That's where my work starts." He goes, "What do you mean?" I said, "How do you make the decisions? That's at the back of your mind all the time. You're lumping everyone into that one group, and you're making decisions for all the wrong reasons. They're fear-based decision making. That's where my work starts." He said, "How much time do you have?" I said, "I have a 6:30 flight." He said, "I'm going to take a break. Could we talk?" I said, "Could I get some coffee somewhere?" Because I hadn't had coffee. I was like out of it. So he said, "I'll get you a cup of coffee." And we talked for a half hour. He said, "This is the most enlightening conversation I've ever had," because he would tell me something and then I would dig a little bit deeper.
Right.
What made you think that happened in order to make that decision? So he said, "I'm thinking of this person." So I said, "You're judging this person by what that person did. How much of a similarity is there?" And he said, "Actually, none." I said, "So why not just judge that person based on that person? Clear the clutter in your brain. Then would you have made the right decision?" And he said, like, I saw him about 6 months later, and he said, "I am not working in the same way that I did. And I didn't from that moment on." That's the power of the work that I do in shadow work, because I go to that um, word that they share with me. The When somebody says, "I don't think I'm good enough," I go, "Tell me what enough means." And they go, "What do you mean?" I said, "What is good enough? What is good enough for you? Good enough for you because of what the standards you set for yourself? Not good enough because your mother's told you for the last 40 years that you're not good enough? Or your teacher told you in school you'll never be good enough?" How many people have gone through that? And they listen to the teacher saying, "My teacher said I'll never amount to anything." So they filter everything else through that. I get rid of all that stuff, and all the fears and the insecurities and the imposter syndrome and all of that. Um, I love working with people who get it quickly. Not everyone does. The border guard got it within a matter of minutes. And some people, they're so busy fighting what they're learning about themselves that it takes longer. So I have to let them live in the question for a little bit and let it simmer. And I think we all benefit by living in the questions
Yeah.
rather than looking for answers.
Now it's interesting how, defining certain things. And I mean, we all have these situations where things control us in some form, or actually things make us make decisions according to somebody else's comments or situations. I mean, I had the same thing. I had a teacher who once said to me, a music teacher who replaced the original music teacher at my high school, who was brilliant, but the person who replaced him was not so brilliant and not so. But he said, "You'll never amount to anything. You'll never be a musician." But we had a little spat. I get along with most people in my life, but there's some people come along that no matter what you do, it doesn't work. And he's
Yep.
and I thank him for it because it always reminds me, you got that wrong. I just had to do the work. That's all.
There you go.
That's it. And you figure it out. You analyze it, and then you do the work, and you do the best you can, and that's it, right?
That's right.
Curiosity also. Anyway,
Yeah.
Donna, I have to say it's a real pleasure. And I'm so happy you had the time to meet with me on this and be on the podcast. This is such an interesting topic. We can go on forever. And at some point, we may have to sit down and do it again after some time and some more books that you write.
I'd love to. This has been phenomenal. I'm very grateful to you because it's wonderful to relive some of those moments and remember them, the pivotal moments in our lives, right? And we don't always do that. Look back and say, you know, what was that pivotal moment for us that helped shape who we are and what we're doing right now, what we bring to the world, and it's a gift. So thank you.
Oh no, thank you because it's not so much missing those, but remembering them, giving homage to those because those were those what we had to do. Practicing overnight, and at 4 o'clock in the morning, the security guard comes in and says, "What are you guys doing?" I was there with Roger. Remember Roger?
Yeah, Roger was terrific. Yeah.
All night we had seen a concert with Louis Charbonneau, and then we said, no, we need to do more practice. 4 o'clock in the morning, we had kept the whole neighborhood up, and we got into a lot of trouble, but that was okay.
Although one of Michael's physiotherapists at the Children's Hospital was talking about, she said she went to McGill. So I said, so did I. She said, yeah, I stayed at the Royal Victoria, the residence. She said those stupid drummers and percussionists, they'd be out on the roof at 2 o'clock in the morning practicing. And Michael would look at me and I'd go, don't say anything, because that was one of them.
Wow, that was Roger and myself. Oh, and then people would say the next day, who's that? I said, I have no idea.
No
Some
idea.
crazy people. That's fantastic. Wow. I never thought somebody else would bring that up again. But it's
Yeah.
interesting. We could pay homage to those, how fortunate we were to have had those crazy moments. Good, crazy. And live with us, cross paths with such incredible people. It would just puts a smile on your face.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
And as I always say, to be continued.